Hello and welcome to the fourth grade channel of Sun Devil Learning Labs. I am Mrs. Khan. Let's get started. All right, so today's lesson, our topic is point of view and specifically first person point of view. All right, so the first thing I want you to do is listen and think. All right, I want you to, as we're reading, think about who is telling the story and how are they telling it, right? Here we go. We are going to read The Little Mouse, The Red Ripe Strawberry, and the Big Hungry Bear by Dawn and Audrey Wood. Here's our cover. The Little Mouse, The Red Ripe Strawberry, and the Big Hungry Bear by Dawn and Audrey Wood, and it's illustrated by Dawn Wood, and it's published by Child's Play. Hello, Little Mouse. What are you doing? Oh, I see. Are you going to pick that red, ripe strawberry? But, Little Mouse, haven't you heard about the big, hungry bear? Oh, how that bear loves red, ripe strawberries. The big, hungry bear can smell a red, ripe strawberry a mile away, especially one that has just been picked. Boom, boom, boom! The bear will tromp through the forest on his big, hungry feet and sniff, 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 find the strawberry. No matter where it is hidden or who is guarding it or how it is disguised. Quick! There's only one way in the whole wide world to save a red, ripe strawberry from the big, hungry bear. Cut it in two, share half with me, and we'll both eat it all up. Yum. Now that's one red, ripe strawberry the big, hungry bear will never get. The end. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this story. If you want to go back and listen to it again, go for it. But what I want you to answer, just for yourself, is did you think about who was telling the story and how they were telling it? Right? That'll lead us into what we're going to talk about today, which is point of view, right? We're going to talk about first person point of view. And our objective for today is I can explain what first person point of view is and how to recognize it in a story. All right? So think about what is point of view? When you think about point of view, you want to ask who is telling the story, right? And we have three different possible points of view, and those are first person, second person, and third person, all right? Today, we are going to be talking about first person and touching a little bit on second person, but that's only because it's not something you're going to learn this year, all right? We'll just talk about it a little bit, but it's not our main point today. So point of view, all right? We want to find the point of view of what we're reading so we're able to understand who is telling the story, right? And so we might better understand their perspective on events happening, right? And when we think about who's telling the story, we have to remember that the narrator is the person that tells the story, and we see the story from their point of view, right? So what is point of view, right? Point of view is the perspective from which a story is told, right? We have first person, second person, third person, just like I mentioned. First person is the author's writing from their point of view or their perspective. Usually the main character is telling the story. right? A second person is where the narrator tries to address the reader, right? Easy examples of that is a how-to or a recipe, right? And third person is when the narrator is someone outside of the story and is not one of the characters, right? They tell us about all of the characters and their actions, okay? First person point of view is a person involved in the story is telling the story, right? And it includes their thoughts and feelings, right? Their motivations. And in a first person story, it's like we're looking at the story through the eyes of the teller, right? Or being told a story, right? And just to reiterate, right, the narrator from a first person story is telling what is happening from their perspective and is actually in the story. Okay? So signal or clue words, right? We have a lot of those in our different structures and topics, correct? So there are pronouns that we can look for in a story in order to identify if it is being told in first person, right? If you remember what a pronoun is a word that replaces a noun, a person, place, or thing, right? There are pronouns that we can look for in the story in order to identify if it's being told in first person, all right? So the clue words for a first person point of view are I, me, my, mine, ours, we, and us, right? And some examples for that, all right? First person examples. You got to remember to look for your clue words, right? Think, what are the clue words in this sentence? Okay, we have 3 of them. The first sentence is, I always look forward to summer vacation. Your clue word is I, right? That's how you know it's being told in first person. Second one is, if it were up to me, I would choose the car, right? Our clue words are me and I, right? First person. And our third one is, we like to walk our dogs on the weekend. Clue word is we, that tells us it's first person, all right? All right, talking about clue words, and just as an overview, okay? When looking for the point of view of a story, right, we must be able to identify the difference between the clue words for first person, second person, and third person, right? So with first person, if the story is told by a person in the story, okay, the clue words, just like we said, are I, me, my, we, mine, ours, and us, right? In second person, this type of story, the narrator tries to address the reader. So if we're reading it, it's as we read it, it seems like they're talking to us, right? And the clue words for that are you, your, and yours, right? And in third person, the narrator is not part of the story, all right? And the clue words to look for are he, she, they, them, it, and the names of characters, okay? Just an overview. If you want to write those down, go for it. It'll be a good reference, okay? So here we go. All right, so how to recognize first person, all right? Remember to look for your clue words. We can recognize a story is written in first person through the way the narrator speaks in the story, all right? You want to ask yourself, is the narrator using words like me and I, or they and them, all right? To recognize that a story is being written in first person, also look to see if the story is being told by a character in the story or someone else outside the story, right? All right, so how does point of view make a difference, right? A difference in point of view or perspective can change how a story is told, what is focused on, and what kind of information is given, right? If I told you a story about something that I read, right? That's a different perspective than if I told you a story about something that happened to me today, right? Those are two different perspectives. So, as an example, think about this, right? Think about a time that you and your sibling or cousin or friend, right, had an argument and then told an adult what happened. Did you both say the exact same things? Or were your stories a little bit different because you both had different points of view, right? That's the difference in perspective and the difference in point of view, right? All right, so what I want to do next is we're going to do a listen and think again, okay? But this time, I want you to close your eyes and imagine what's happening, okay? Think about who is telling the story and how are they telling it, right? If you want to read along, you can do that, but I do want you to try and imagine what's happening, okay? So what we're going to do, we are going to read an excerpt, so a piece of a story, right? From Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend by Matthew Dix, right? This is a chapter book, so we're only going to read a little bit of it. All right, so let's get on to the story. This is Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend by Matthew Dix. The title page, our title is Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend. Our author is Matthew Dix, and it's published by St. Martin's Press. Chapter 1. Here is what I know. My name is Budo. I have been alive for 5 years. 5 years is a very long time for someone like me to be alive. Max gave me my name. Max is the only human person who can see me. Max's parents call me an imaginary friend. I love Max's teacher, Mrs. Gosk. I do not like Max's other teacher, Mrs. Patterson. I am not imaginary. Chapter 2. I am lucky as imaginary friends go. I have been alive for a lot longer than most. I once knew an imaginary friend named Philippe. He was the imaginary friend of one of Max's classmates in preschool. He lasted less than a week. One day he popped into the world looking pretty human except for his lack of ears. Lots of imaginary friends lack ears. And then a few days later, he was gone. I'm also lucky that Max has a great imagination. I once knew an imaginary friend named Chomp who was just a spot on the wall, just a fuzzy black blob without any real shape at all. Chomp could talk and sort of slide up and down the wall, but he was two-dimensional like a piece of paper, so he could never pry himself off. He didn't have arms and legs like me. He didn't even have a face. Imaginary friends get their appearance from their human friends' imagination. Max is a very creative boy, and so I have 2 arms, 2 legs, and a face. I'm not missing a single body part, and that makes me a rarity in the world of imaginary friends. Most imaginary friends are missing something or other, and some don't even look human at all, like Chomp. Too much imagination can be bad, though. I once met an imaginary friend named Pterodactyl whose eyes were stuck on the ends of these 2 gangly green antennas. His human friend probably thought they looked cool, but poor Pterodactyl couldn't focus on anything to save his life. He told me that he constantly felt sick to his stomach and was always tripping over his own feet, which were just fuzzy shadows attached to his legs. His human friend was so obsessed with Pterodactyl's head and those eyes that he had never bothered to think about anything below Pterodactyl's waist. This is not unusual. I'm also lucky because I'm mobile. Lots of imaginary friends are stuck to their human friends. Some have leashes around their necks. Some are 3 inches tall and get stuffed into coat pockets. And some are nothing more than a spot on the wall like Chomp. But thanks to Max, I can get around on my own. I can even leave Max behind if I want. But doing so too often might be hazardous to my health. As long as Max believes in me, I exist. People like Max's mother and my friend Graham say that this is what makes me imaginary. But it's not true. I might need Max's imagination to exist, but I have my own thoughts, my own ideas, and my own life outside of him. I am tied to Max the same way that an astronaut is tied to his spaceship by hoses and wires. If the spaceship blows up and the astronaut dies, that doesn't mean that the astronaut was imaginary. It just means that his life support was cut off. Same for me and Max.
I need Max in order to survive, but I'm still my own person. I can say and do as I please. Sometimes Max and I even get into arguments, but nothing ever serious. Just stuff about which TV show to watch or which game to play. But it behooves me, that's a word that Mrs. Gosk taught the class last week, to stick around Max whenever possible, because I need Max to keep thinking about me, keep believing in me. I don't want to end up out of sight, out of mind, which is something Max's mom sometimes says when Max's dad forgets to call home when he's going to be late. If I am gone too long, Max might stop believing in me, and if that happens, then poof. Chapter 3. Max's first grade teacher once said that houseflies live for about 3 days. I wonder what the lifespan of an imaginary friend is. Probably not much longer. I guess that makes me practically ancient. Max imagined me when he was 4 years old, and just like that, I popped into existence. When I was born, I only knew what Max knew. I knew my colors and some of my numbers, and the names for lots of things like tables and microwave ovens and aircraft carriers. My head was filled with the things that a 4-year-old boy would know. But Max also imagined me much older than him, probably a teenager, maybe even a little older. Or maybe I was just a boy with a grown-up's brain. It's hard to tell. I'm not much taller than Max, but I'm definitely different. I was more together than Max when I was born. I could make sense of things that still confused him. I could see the answers to problems that Max could not. Maybe this is how all imaginary friends are born. I don't know. Max doesn't remember the day that I was born, so he can't remember what he was thinking at the time. But since he imagined me as older and more together, I have been able to learn much faster than Max. I was able to concentrate and focus better on the day I was born than Max is able to even today. On that first day, I remember Max's mother was trying to teach him to count by even numbers, and he just couldn't get it. But I learned it right away. It made sense to me because my brain was ready to learn even numbers. Max's brain wasn't. At least that's what I think. Also, I don't sleep because Max didn't imagine that I needed sleep. So I have more time to learn. And I don't spend all my time with Max, so I've learned lots of things that Max has never seen or heard before. After he goes to bed, I sit in the living room or the kitchen with Max's parents. We watch television or I just listen to them talk. Sometimes I go places. I go to the gas station that never closes because my favorite people in the world, except for Max and his parents and Mrs. Gosk, are there. Or I go to Doogie's hot dog restaurant a little ways down the road, or to the police station, or to the hospital. Except I don't go to the hospital anymore because Oswald is there and he scares me. And when we are in school, I sometimes go to the teacher's lounge or another classroom, and sometimes I even go to the principal's office just to listen to what's going on. I am not smarter than Max, but I know a lot more than him just because I am awake more and go places that Max can't. This is good. Sometimes I can help Max when he doesn't understand something so well. Like last week, Max couldn't open a jar of jelly to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Budo, he said, I can't open it. Sure you can, I said. Turn it the other way. Lefty-loosey, righty-tighty. That is something I hear Max's mom say to herself sometimes before she opens a jar. It worked. Max opened the jar. But he was so excited that he dropped it on the tile floor, smashing it into a million pieces. The world can be so complicated for Max. Even when he gets something right, it can still go wrong. I live in a strange place in the world. I live in the space in between people. I spend most of my time in the kid world with Max, but I also spend a lot of time with adults like Max's parents and teachers and my friends at the gas station, except they can't see me. Max's mom would call this straddling the fence. She says this to Max when he can't make up his mind about something, which happens a lot. Do you want the blue popsicle or the yellow popsicle? She asks. And Max just freezes like a popsicle. There are just too many things for Max to think about when choosing. Is red better than yellow? Is green better than blue? Which one is colder? Which one will melt fastest? What does green taste like? What does red taste like? Do different colors taste different? I wish that Max's mom would just make the choice for Max. She knows how hard it is for him, but when she makes him choose and he can't, I sometimes choose for him. I whisper, "Pick blue." And then he says, "I'll take blue." And then it's done. No more straddling the fence. That's kind of how I live. I straddle the fence. I live in the yellow and the blue world. I live with kids and I live with adults. I'm not exactly a kid, but I'm not exactly an adult either. I'm yellow and blue. I'm green. I know my color combinations too.
All right, so hopefully you enjoyed that piece of the story, all right? And did you close your eyes and imagine what was happening? Did you think about who was telling the story and how they were telling it, right? So let's go over that a little bit, all right? So, how did we know in the story that it's first person, right? We can spot the clue words within the example. And the clue words are I, me, my, mine, we, us, and ours, right? This lets us know that the person telling the story is one of the characters in the story, right? So our example from the book is the first part that I read. Here's what I know. My name is Budo. I have been alive for 5 years. 5 years is a very long time for someone like me to be alive. Max gave me my name. Max is the only human person who can see me, right? When we look through this, I have highlighted our clue words, and those were I, my, I, me, my, and me, right? That tells us that the person that's telling us the story is in the story, right? All right, so let's think about the impact of first person, all right? So through first person stories, right, we talked about this a little bit earlier, we receive information as the narrator, right? How they feel, what they think, everything that they experience, right? And we're getting a look into the mind of one of the characters, right? Thinking about that piece that we just read, Budo is telling the story and he's telling us his thoughts and his feelings, how he sees the world, right? And then we base our judgments and assumptions in a first person text from the information we're given from someone who is a character in the story, right? So we base everything we know in the story from that story, if we kept reading it, we base it all on what Budo knows and what he thinks, right? All right, so one more. Are you ready for this? This is a bonus listen and think. If you don't want to do this one, go ahead and skip to the end, all right? So what I want you to do is listen to this excerpt and notice the point of view, all right? We're not going to quiz on this one, but I want you to think about it and think about the difference between Memoirs of an Imaginary Friend, that was the one whose character is Budo, right? And then think about what's going on in this one, okay? So we're going to read an excerpt, right? A piece of Tales from the Haunted Mansion, Volume 1, The Fearsome Foursome, by Amicus Arcane, all right? All right, so here's our cover. Our title page, Tales from the Haunted Mansion, Volume 1, The Fearsome Foursome, transcribed by John Esposito, as told by Mansion Librarian Amicus Arcane. Illustrations by Kelly Jones. And it's published by Disney Press. This section is titled, Welcome to Our Library. Stop reading. You heard me. Put this book down this instant. Put it back where you found it. For your own sake, I beseech you. You're not the type. What type is that, you ask? Our type. Still here? Very well. Can't say we didn't warn you. Welcome, foolish reader, to the illustrious library of, well, you know where you are. Allow me to introduce myself. I am your guide, Amicus Arcane, the sole librarian and entrusted keeper of 999 bone-chilling tales. Every spirit has a story, you see, a haunted history dying to get out, so it can follow you home. But heed this warning, we're always on the lookout for one more tale, perhaps even yours. We, if you haven't guessed, are known as the parlance of the living, as spirits, specters, poltergeists, apparitions, or if you prefer, ghosts. We are at our most spirited among the books, harboring a special affinity for those tales that burrow under the flesh long after their authors have departed the corruptible mortal vessels. In this way, books themselves are rather like ghosts. Their very bindings contain the spirits of the dead, and that means this terrifying tome is haunted, which means this isn't merely a book you're holding, but an actual ghost. And that brings us to the subject at hand, the fearsome foursome. Their little club, you see, was also interested in ghosts, and zombies, and mummies, and just about everything that goes bump in the night. Their founding body consisted of Willa, Tim, Noah, and Steve, 4 middle school students with a talent for storytelling and an appetite for the macabre. Their one goal, to frighten the wits out of each other with the scariest stories they could muster. A lofty goal, if I may say so myself. But this week, their meeting was abruptly cancelled. As it happens, their clubhouse was ravaged by a violent storm. Perhaps we had something to do with it. Who can say? My memory isn't what it used to be since that coroner removed my brain. The important thing to take with you is that the fearsome foursome had no place to tell their tales, so we provided them with a home. A bit off the beaten path, I will admit, but you can always take the shortcut through the graveyard. It's almost time for you to meet them. You see, I too have a tale or 2, or 3, or 4 that I'm dying to share. Once they heard them, their lives were never the same. Nor will yours. All right, so you probably liked that one. Did you, as you were listening to it or reading it, right, did you notice what point of view it was? And how did you know, right? So think about, it was a second person point of view, because when we remember our clue words, we think about what are the clue words in the sentence, right? And for second person, it's like me talking to you, right? I say you and your a lot. So in these examples, to make cookies, you need to have all of the ingredients ready first, right? It says you in the sentence. Your teacher is very proud of your progress, right? Those are both second person point of view. And in second person point of view, the narrator is trying to talk to the reader. Did you notice that as you were reading it or listening to it, they could have just been talking to you, right? All right, so let's wrap up, okay? So today we learned how to recognize when a story is being told in first person, right? We learned the clue words or pronouns that are present within a first person text. We also learned how we can recognize the difference between a first person story, a second person story, and a third person story. And lastly, we learned the impact of a first person text to us as the readers of the story, right? All right, so thank you for joining me. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.